If you don't understand catcher progressions, you don't understand how to coach a catcher. That may sound a little extreme, but I promise it's true. The progressions are the roadmap to help your catcher grow. And so in this video, I'm going to walk through certain frameworks that I use for progressions in order to help you better understand how you should think about this, how you can apply this on your own, and if you want help from me, how I would go about applying it with you. So this is a website, this is a page on my website. It's called CatchCORE. It's an offering that I do. It's a one-to-one video coaching offering that I do where I work with catchers and we talk through different catcher progressions. And they send me videos and I give them feedback every day. And this is like the real magic of why it's so effective is because of the progressions and because of the way that it's set up. Okay, so there's three main things that I want to talk about. Number one, the progression of what skill do we focus on? Number two, the progression of giving ourselves enough time to actually work on the progression and instill it into our body. And then number three, the progression of how do we sequence the drills? So with that being said, let's talk about the first one. Most catching coaches, as soon as you do a lesson with them, they take you and you throw with them. Let's get better at our pop time. I think that is a bad job of the catching coach. I think throwing is important and it is a great way to help catchers. It's an important skill set. But if you truly want to develop the catcher to give them the best chance they have in order to play at a higher level, they really need to have locked down stances. They need to be elite receivers. They need to be elite blockers, and they can have an okay average arm. Now, this is crazy because if you look at catcher highlights, the number one thing that you're going to see is throwing highlights. And that's because it's more exciting, it's cooler, and it's easier to measure. You can put a stopwatch on someone and measure their pop time. It's really hard to measure objectively how good someone's stance is or how good someone's receiving is. That's really hard. Now you can do it more with like K-zones and stuff, and that's why receiving has become such a big, important thing. But when you think about developing your catcher through progressions, focus on the thing that happens the most. And so if I minimize myself a little bit more, you'll see that, this is with the math of, this is a 100-pitch game, just for simple math. The higher levels you go, the more pitches you'll see. The lower levels, the less pitches you'll see. But just for sake of simplicity, if you take a 100-pitch game, you're going to see they're going to get into 200 stances. They're going to probably receive about 80 times. They'll maybe block 15 times and throw maybe 5. So why are we focusing all the time on throwing when that's actually the thing that happens the least amount in the game, right? We need to focus on the right things first so that we can get to the things that really matter, right? We want to be good at the things that happen the most. So next thing is one skill a week. Now this program that I have, this CatchCORE program, it's set up in a way where you do 10 minutes at home and you do that every day. The reason I set it up that way is because I was doing 60-minute lessons. What I found was I would work with a catcher one-on-one. We work for 60 minutes. We'd go through our drills. They would go home. They would never practice. They'd come back, and it would look like we hadn't even worked. And I was like, man, there's got to be a better way to do this. This isn't as effective as it could be. I know it could be more effective. You could be going so much faster. And so I took the idea of, well, hey, 10 minutes a day, do a little, a lot is almost always better than doing a lot, a little. So what if we did that and we structured it in a way that made sense? And so we focus on one skill a week and we work through different progressions for that skill. But we focus on one skill a week to give ourselves enough time to actually make progress on this. And this is something that I struggled with when I was a younger catching coach. I would want to switch too fast, where I would spend 5 minutes on stances and I would look at it and be like, all right, let's go to blocking. Because maybe one, I didn't necessarily know how to help them at that point. Or two, I felt the pressure to do some other catching stuff because there are parents there, right? And they're paying for catching lessons. And why are we spending all this time on stances? As I've gotten more experience, I've learned to just communicate with the parents really well and say, hey, you know what? First lesson. Now I don't even do in-person lessons anymore. But if I do an in-person lesson, a lot of times I'll communicate with the parent and say, hey, you know what? It may look like we're not doing too much catching stuff today. That's because we're doing the most important foundational piece that we can do for a catcher, which is getting them into a good stance. Because a good stance makes everything easier and a bad stance makes everything harder. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. Okay, cool. So that's what we're going to do. And then you get the buy-in from the kid as well, and you help them understand why this is so important to them. And you walk them through these numbers right here. And then they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then you have to actually get them into a good stance, right? But big thing here is don't switch too fast, because if you switch too fast, then they don't actually retain the stuff that you learned. Like, give it enough time to actually implement the movement. So that's second thing. Third thing is really focusing on layering the actual drill progression. And this is oftentimes what people think about when it comes to progressions. But I wanted to cover those other two first, because those are, again, kind of the foundational principle of how do we think about progressions. And so you'll see here how we should build on progressions is we should take one thing at a time. And so I learned this idea from this guy named Jason Selk, who was the mental performance coach for the St. Louis Cardinals when they were winning a bunch of World Series, Albert Pujols, Chris Carpenter, all those guys. And he talked about channel capacity. And that channel capacity is the idea that we only can hold or learn or teach or communicate one thing at a time. If we overwhelm the channel, then it breaks and you don't remember anything. And so you'll see we just focus on one thing at a time. And by going slower, we actually go so much faster. And this has taken me a really long time to learn. I'm still learning this in other areas of my life. But when it comes to teaching catchers, I get it because I've seen it happen so many times. And I'm constantly reminding myself that in other areas of my life as well. So with that being said, what I used to do, what a lot of coaches do, is they'll take all of these bricks, these 7 bricks right here, and they'll put it all on day one, and then you have nothing the rest of the time. And what happens when you do that is you overwhelm the person with information, and then they retain nothing of it. You will go so much faster if you do one thing at a time and get feedback on it, and then do it again the next day, and you compound that. And how it actually works with CatchCORE is essentially you take this, and then this turns into like a stance series, and then you do your little stance series here, and then you do your receiving, and then you work up through that, and then you do your stance series, your receiving series, your blocking. So it's this compounding one thing at a time that really gives kids exceptional results when they do the work, because normally they don't practice every day. Normally they don't get feedback every day. Normally they don't video themselves every day. Normally they don't journal about the things that they do every day. And so when you get all of those things working and you have a plan and you have a coach to guide you, it's crazy how fast you can go. So all that being said, catcher's progressions. If you don't understand the progressions, you don't understand how to coach a catcher. And that is the roadmap. Now, one more thing that I want to say. If you do this in person, if this is a 60-minute lesson, say, what I've found is I spend 80% of my time on these probably first 3 movement patterns in each skill here. And the symbolism here actually is really effective, because if you look at it, and this is kind of just how I drew this on accident, but if you look at it, that's the bottom layer. And the more you stack on top of the bottom layer, if it's broken, the more that bottom layer is going to crack. And that's what happens with catchers, especially when they receive, right? They come up too early, they bounce because they don't trust themselves, because they get scared. So they put their hand in front of their face and then they approach the ball from the top and they bounce, right? All of that stuff. So if you're a coach and you're watching this, like, get focused here on the initial movement patterns. Talk about it with the kid, help them to understand. Talk about it with the parent, help them to understand. If you're a catcher, get laser focused here on the beginning movement patterns and give yourself enough time to actually implement the information. If you're a parent, man, take the daily practice idea and learn how to give the right progression at the right time. If you haven't, if you don't know where to start with the 7-day stance challenge. CatchMadeSimple.com/. It's a great way to start. It takes you through this 7 days, one stance at a time, just in the way that kind of this program is set up. That's my big call to action for you. Work through the progressions, honor the channel capacity. Don't try to communicate too much, or don't try to learn too much, or don't try to do too much at a time. Take it one day at a time, one drill at a time, one progression at a time. So I didn't get too much into the actual drill progressions, but hopefully this helps you understand the mindset that you should have as you go about the progressions. And don't move to the next one until you're about 70-80% correct, right? You don't want to be 100% before you move up, but you want to be getting it right before you move up. Otherwise, you have no chance at the next level as it gets harder in terms of the progressions, right? Don't move to the next progression until you've actually gotten the first progression right. So that's what I got. If you want help, you want to learn more about CatchCORE, you can check out the URL right here. It's CatchMadeSimple.com/CatchCORE, or just go to my website, CatchMadeSimple.com, and click on video coaching. I don't know if the website will ever change at some point. It probably will, but check it out. And if you want help coaching your kid, then let me know. I'd love to connect with you guys and at least point you in the right direction. So that's what I got. Honor the progressions, do the work. The shortcut is going the long way once. So great work. I'll see you soon.